let's just remember like what. Give me 1 second. Hold on. So the first thing is like let's just remember uh, our general workflow. I think I have it here, right? Which is we'd have the data pipeline where, say, we dump data into S3 buckets, right? So you can kind of remember how we did that, right? We hit that. Um, we hit our external API, right? In that giant lab, it was that Amadeus API, and then we use a Lambda function to hit the API, pull the data into S3, coerce the data into like this list of dictionaries or CSV, and then load it into a database, right? Our Snowflake database. From there, oftentimes, if say we didn't really coerce the data, but just, we had too much info as we normally do, staging is where we'll clean up the data, right? And we clean up each source individually, right? So it could be from HubSpot or from Asana or from Stripe or whatever. We'll dedicate a separate file to clean each data source up, just the same way that we have like back from the first semester, right? We would have an adapter to clean up each API, right? Each source of the data. So that's basically staging, and then we'll combine the data. This to me also feels kind of, if we didn't really do multiple APIs in our project, but imagine if we did, right? And we had, we use Foursquare, imagine we also use Yelp. We would want to combine the data, right? And say like, okay, we got some venues from here, we got some venues from there, but they're all just venues. And we would load that, into our database, right? And combine that information probably just by first creating instances from a model and then saving it. So integration is to take data from these different like schemas and load it. And we'll see it's not, and just put it into one table. That's the integration. So first we have the original data, we clean each of the sources of the data, and then we combine them, right? Because we have some overlapping data. And we also want to like dedupe it, right? If we have the same user from multiple places, we want to make sure we're not listing that user twice, right? Things like that. And then finally we'll have like the marts, okay? Where the marts this is what like outside stakeholders will query, right? This is like the fact table and the dimension tables, right? Our star schema. So that's the ultimate goal, is to get to something that people will want to use internally. So that's the idea, right, with DBT is we'll start with like our messy data, and then through these components, we'll clean the data, combine the data, and then finally, organize it into a star schema to present or to give access to different stakeholders. All right, cool. So that's why we're using DBT. And the nice thing about it is all this is in the database, right? Like all of this is in Snowflake. So, and it's just going to be in different schemas. So you can, just to show you, right, like when at the end of last class, this was our schema, right? We have this DBT thing and we have this view, and you can just look at like dimension customers. And so anyone that has access to the database can really see our transformations, and anyone that has access to our DBT repository, just by, basically reading SQL, they can also see the transformations. So people call this like the data lineage. You can see, all right, like this is originally what we started with. And if we want to add new data, we don't have to really go anywhere. We can just view it in the database. Yeah, William.
And queries to tables that are built with DBT potentially have way worse performance than just a regular table.
They'll use, I don't think so, because it's used underneath the hood. It is querying Snowflake. You know what I mean? Like it's compiling this. Anything you write, say you write Jinja, it will first compile it to Snowflake. First compile it into SQL, then write Snowflake. It would be more direct, I guess. Like you won't go through that compilation step. So perhaps there's that. I think the bigger issue, I would still more like when I'm testing out queries, like when I'm not really building a pipeline, but rather doing more exploration, I would go to Snowflake. Like go directly to the source. The main reason is like debugging. Like that's kind of a significant reason. And you're just yeah, it's for me. It would probably be just more for debugging purposes. It probably will be a little It will be faster. I think there's less of a lag, right? Because you're not compiling it and you're not waiting on that connection, I guess, from DBT over to Snowflake. So I think,
I get,
yeah.
yeah, I think more what I'm asking is like you have this table that's abstracted to you from Snowflake, and maybe you think you're just querying it like a normal table, or sorry, it's abstracted by DBT,
Hmm.
but potentially behind the scenes, there's like a super complex query that DBT uses to make that table. And so maybe every time I queried that table from DBT, I'm actually doing like a super complicated query in the background. Is that possible, or is that not?
That's possible. So what we'll get into is like Jinja, but where with Jinja, it's kind of like you can like loop through. You can write Python to create SQL queries, but with DBT, what you can do is say we compile it. You can see if you click on compile, this is uh, the SQL that it will be running, right? So you should view the SQL and see, okay, what is it? Should I be optimizing this somehow?
Okay, thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, Lysa, can choose to persist a table that, right? This is like with a materialized view versus a unmaterialized view. We'll talk about views later on. It's not that complicated. Uh, Okay, but yeah, so yeah, you can see ultimately these things can get long. Like these, I think that's more the thing is like people just writing complicated SQL that takes a long time, and that you then and really like it won't even probably go through a lab. It used to be a take-home exam for some students, like an interview question for some students, with like very complicated SQL, and they're asked to refactor it. And it's more just like this, like people using CTEs like that are enormous, and that could be made simpler. That's normally what I see. Okay, so before we get into that, just want to make sure we kind of get the whole purpose here, right? Is one, we can, clean our data, combine our data, present it to stakeholders. By doing this in DBT, we can, and by DBT, I really mean by doing all of this in a single database, as opposed to, say, some of it in Python, some, loading it into S3, like kind of that complicated Lambda function stuff. If we can keep more and more of our pipeline in DBT, the benefit at least is, well, it's all in one repository. We can view how our data got changed, and we can access the original data. You don't have to access it from S3 if you don't, if it's possible to load into Snowflake, right? Because people can then query it, which is nice. All right, so it's just like it's simpler. So that's the argument. Like if you read through DBT's material, that's what the case they'll make for using as much as possible this pattern. All right, so let's go through just, we did like the workflow of DBT. We can do now like staging. So remember with staging, and I know you still need to probably reread the workflow and do the lab, but that's fine. The next step is understanding staging. So just remember, like with staging, what we're doing is we're taking our original data set and we're just cleaning, right, one of these guys. Okay? So that's the idea. And in our case, it's probably our customers table. So let me go here. You can see, I'll delete this, I guess. So what we'll do is in the models, you'll create a new folder called staging. And the name of your model in DBT is important, right? This is like how you'll reference it. It's also this, if you have a file called dimension customers, it will create a view of, meaning like a table essentially of this name, right? It will create, so this name is important, has a significance. All right, so again, what we're gonna wanna do is select data from our source, and that's data that already exists in our database. So I think I have it maybe in my Fivetran database. Let me see. Yeah, I have it in my Fivetran database. You can see in our Postgres, right? So this is our source data, which ultimately will come up. But remember, we have the customers and the suppliers and all that stuff. Okay, so this is our source tables, and what we want to do is like start just chugging away on this stuff. Like take one of these like customers and start cleaning the data. So that's the step that we're on, and that will be our staging. So to do this, we can, I guess, start by if I go to like worksheets, and maybe we should choose a different one. Let's just do a new worksheet, a SQL worksheet, and Fivetran database. And you can start, like I kind of was talking about with William, like you can start experimenting or writing the code directly in Snowflake as a way to just debug when things inevitably go wrong. So if you want to do this, it'll be, select all from the dot customers. Let's just do like a limit 3. I'm always just writing this stuff out in, testing it along the way. And generally, the way that we'll coerce the data is first we'll do this through CTEs. Remember CTEs where we have the with statement, with something as, and then inside here is where we'll write the query. Okay, so as we'll see with DBT, the pattern that's recommended is you first have what's called a source, or like really an import CTE, where all that happens in this first CTE is you specify the source of the data. So let's do that now. So we'll do select all from customers and just put that here. And we'll say with source as select all from customers, and then we'll say like select all from source and say limit 10. And this is all one statement, right? There's only one semicolon here. Okay, and this worked fine. So just to review, right, we're selecting our entire table, we're naming it source, right? And then we're selecting everything from source, okay? And this is called our import CTE, and it seems kind of like nothing happened here. The whole point of this is or the reason why this is recommended is to say, like kind of specify your dependencies of the file. This is, like I said, this is basically like an import statement in Python script. We're saying, hey, this is what we're going to be relying on in this script. All right, so at least to begin with, if we're not worried about, this is the recommended way. Then the next thing is actually the logical CTE. So this is where we'll clean up our data. So in that case, it could be, separating out like our contact name, etc. We'll call this renamed. You can call it, something else, but this is the pattern I've seen. And this is where we'll actually clean up our data. So say select the customer, we'll specify the columns we want. I don't know why I'm caps lock. The customer ID, the country, that's fine. And then we'll say the split part. So what I'm going to do here is just do some light cleaning, right? So we'll clean the contact name, and then I think we can do it this way. And here I'm just selecting the first name. So I'm splitting on a string, selecting the first element as first name, and then we'll do the same thing as the second name, the last name. Right, and that will be number 2. And that might be it. Do I need any more columns? I think that's it. Okay, so in this case, I'm selecting this, and this is typical when you're writing multiple CTEs. I'm selecting from from this above, all right, from the CTE above. So it's like with source as, select my source table, this customers table. Then this next step is to call it renamed, is like this logical CTE where I'm cleaning the data, right? Splitting apart the first and last name from my import data. And then what do I want to do? Select all from renamed, okay? And just make sure that this actually occurred. So I think, cool. So this is fine, And ultimately, we want to take away the limit, but this counts, right? This is staging, okay? Or, not, we want to move it to DBT. But again, like as a workflow, writing this stuff out first, at least when they're simple or when you can, in Snowflake, and then moving over to DBT, it's not a bad idea. And whenever I find an error in DBT, my first step is basically to try to test this out in Snowflake. That's the way that I debug, at least. Okay, so we can just copy and paste this over here. We can write preview, right, and just make sure this works. Okay, so this works fine. The next thing is I don't want to limit 10, but rather I want to select all from renamed. The other thing is, right, notice I deleted the semicolon. Remember those semicolons, for whatever reason, it doesn't allow them. And now we can build it. So what does build do? When we call preview, all it does is actually perform the query, right? It just does a select statement. When we build the model, it will change our database. It will create a view, right? And where the view will be populated with the results from the last select statement. So it's going to create a view called dimension customers, where the results it'll be like create view as this stuff select all from renamed. So that's what we'll see is a view with our cleaned up data called dimension customers. So let's do that. We'll do db2 build dash is it models, I think, and then we can do dimension customers. Notice also, like when you specify the model, well, let's not talk too soon. Let's make sure it works. Okay, it does work. But notice when I specified the model that I'm not doing .SQL, right? It won't work, I believe, if you try that. The next thing I generally do is, one, we can see it's successful. That's just pure luck. Oftentimes, it won't be for me. And I'll look at I'll go to, let me just show you again. There's summary. This gives you some information, and sometimes it's good enough. I'll click on details almost immediately to see what's going on. Okay. So here, where can I actually see my query? Does it not show me? Download the logs on success using a Snowflake. So it's showing PCDBT DB. It's not, I guess only when it breaks, maybe it shows the query. I'm surprised. So this will, let me see if I do compile. Yeah, I mean, it's not really showing the view that it actually created. But what we can do is we can go over to, it's still useful because we can see, remember, I can look at my previous runs by clicking on that arrow there. And then, again, if I look on the details, maybe under system logs, details. Sending the event, not really. Okay, but what I'm looking for is like what was the actual view it created. So this is the database, PCDBT-DB, right? And then I kind of know that it's doing this in that underscore DBT schema. So let's just look for it here. And there we go. Was it properly closed? It's not the best. All right, let's look at it. Okay, so we're going to go to my PC DBT DB database where I said I created it. And then I'll look at this DBT underscore. And then here's my views. And then here, you can even already see it, is dimension customers with customer, country, first name, last name. If I want, I should be able to place name in editor, select all from, let's do a limit 10, right? And run the results. Let's just press play. There we go. In here, right, it looks pretty good. So it has created that view. And specifically, right, it's cleaning our data, right? This is our first step, is just to clean our data sources. So just to like review, we added this file. We put it in, we can delete this example thing. We put it in a folder called staging. We named it. I think the name is probably bad. Normally we'll call it something like stage customers, is I think what the reading will tell you to do. And so remember that will create a view called stage customers, which sounds better. And then we did this with these 3 steps really, of one, specifying your import CTE. So that's like, where is the data coming from? This is equivalent to, this is just specifying your dependency. So it's similar in Python as to how we have to specify our import statements. Then our logical CTE, where we're actually performing some work, meaning we're cleaning our data. And then finally, the select statement, where the results of the select statement is what your view will be populated with. Okay? So if you do limit 10 down here, you're only going to get 10 results in your view over in Snowflake. That's why I obviously didn't do that. Anything else? Then the next thing that you'll have to do, right, if this work looks good to you, we should save it, right? I see that little dot there. And then we should commit and sync, meaning that we're pushing this up to the branch, right, to the sample branch in GitHub. We can say added staging customers, cleans the, let's say, creates first and last name for customers. Then commit the changes. This will push up. So again, like, you want to think about what's going underneath. This pushes up to GitHub on this branch, and then we would merge these changes into the main branch. So let's do that. And that should switch us over, I think, over to main. So now I'm on the main branch, and you can see that I have this staging customers file. Okay? So there's like 2 different things to keep track of. One is, did we update the database? Right? Like, there's 2 kind of permanent changes that occur. One is, right, are we updating the database? And that you check by going to Snowflake and looking in the database that's connected and seeing the view and kind of seeing that update. The second thing is, okay, we wrote code. We want that code to be once it looks good, we want that code to be available to others. So we merge it into main, and then we could. I think it probably already pushed it into main, but we could push it into main. Yeah, so we'll get into like sources. So Chinmay is saying, you can make a YAML file that specifies your sources. We'll get into that probably by today as to how to do that. Because he's saying, this is kind of long, right? There's other issues with this too, but this is kind of long, right?
I don't understand why you create the model first in Snowflake and then copy to DBT. It's like extra step. What I think first because if you already created the model over here, we can just create or replace view, and this is already saved. Then why we need to
why
copy
do I need DBT?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so yeah, we could perform all the work of DBT just purely in Snowflake worksheets, right? Remember kind of like what DBT is trying to do for us is bring best practices of coding into like these SQL queries. And very typically, like if you think of like what was the world like before DBT, it was people like me, writing queries like my own ad hoc query like this, but not connecting it to a repository and providing, a degree of organization to it, not having any Git commits, right? And trying it out first and then merging it and then allowing other teammates to work with this, right? So, and not having like tests, which we'll get into. So that's the idea, is for Snowflake, like almost everything, like 98% of what we'll do in DBT, we could just write purely in Snowflake. But the reason for doing it in DBT is using like a professional workflow, all right, a developer's workflow to do so. Right? The reason why I personally, lots of times, will, at least in the beginning, go directly to Snowflake is it removes one more thing that can go wrong, right? Like this is just my standard way of debugging anything, is limit all the complexity to isolate what's breaking, right? And then bring it over.
Hi, Jeff. Yeah, I probably didn't hear this clearly. Like the theme customer table, like where did you specify to create that table, like
Uh,
in DBT?
oh, you're talking about, okay. So where did dim, remember this file was originally called dim customers. So I wish it showed you when I did dbt build. Let's try this, dbt build. I wonder if I can build from here. Okay, so build stage customers. I wish it showed me the actual query. Okay, started a model. You see this? dbt underscore stage customers. Okay, create a SQL view model, dbt underscore stage customers. Where did this name come from? This file. Okay, if you change the name of the file, it will change the view that it creates. So now if I go over here, and I might have to refresh. Oh, there it is. I actually didn't even have to refresh. I created this. I didn't change any code here. The only thing I did was rename the file. So
Okay.
yeah.
So you create a theme demand a customer table before you change the name, right? Before you change the name to stage
No,
customer, like
no. I never created this table. A dbt is creating it for me. When I do this dbt build, what it does is that's what building kind of means, is it's going to query this and then create a view where the view is populated with the results of the last statement here, the results of this last statement.
Yeah. So my question is like after you change the name, like to stage customer, can you still run like a DBT build model like a theme customer? Because
No,
I
no,
don't think like they will. Right.
that I don't think will work. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, that won't
Yeah.
work.
Okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay, so you all get the workflow, right? If I wanna do something new, like add say another staging model, um, like the DBT word for these files, right, is models. You can see that. So if I want to add like another staging model, right, I'll have to create a new branch, right? This is it stops us from actually writing code, I think, right? If I try to, see this, I'm trying to type, but it won't let me write code on main branch, which is a good practice. So I have to change my branch and call something, right, like, stage something else, suppliers. Actually, I think I'll have to, sorry, the interface just always changes. I'll have to create and click on this button to create a new branch called stage suppliers. So I'll do that, submit it. This will create a new branch, check out that branch, right? And then this is where I can finally add a new file, right, called stage suppliers. And then I would be on my way writing the next cleanup of the data, which will have these things. Source CTE, logical CTE, select statement, that ultimately when I build it creates a view. Yeah, this feel all right? Yeah, kind of. Well, you'll practice it. Questions? Anything that can help clear up?